Morning, guys. How you guys doing today?
Morning, Ben.
Morning, Ben.
Nice to see you both on the podcast for the first time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Duo from TLC. Appreciate you guys coming on, spending some time with us this morning. For anyone that hasn't seen a prior episode, maybe you just want to give a brief introduction on each of you, your background and roles with TLC.
Yeah, so I'm Jamie Mielde. I've been working with TLC for about 4 years now, working on pricing and rail operations, packaging operations, blending, all kinds of things like that.
A little bit of everything.
Yep.
Jack of all trades.
Joe?
I'm Joe Hassenfratz, sales and marketing manager at the Logistix company. Mainly head up bringing on a lot of new business and carriers as well. So busy.
I can imagine. I'm sure you guys are both very popular these days.
Yep. For good and
Jumping right into it, I know one of the things we've been talking a lot about really the last week to 2 weeks as gas prices have obviously skyrocketed. Obviously a big part of truck freight is the FSC or fuel surcharge. I guess question for you, Jamie, is what's been happening the last 2 weeks, maybe even backing it up just a brief second and explaining what the fuel surcharges are and how they impact rates, as well as what's going on here currently.
Yeah, so the fuel surcharge is something that, is added to a per mile line haul that is basically the compensator for the fuel that's used by the truck on your shipment. Fuel surcharges historically, I think back when I was starting out a few years ago, they were, 17%, 20%, something like that. Now they've been skyrocketing the last, 6 months, and especially the last, week or so here. About a week ago it was 36% or so, and this week it's up to 45, 46, 47.
Crazy.
For this week. And that's that's just a percentage that gets put on top of that mileage that you're already paying for.
So if a line haul is $1,000 and the fuel surcharge is currently 40%, you're really paying $1,400.
Exactly.
That's how that works.
Yep.
Crazy. That's quite the increase, and obviously something you guys are kind of scrambling, and a lot of people are scrambling to figure out how to tackle that. Obviously, if you guys are giving rates on whether it's a daily, a weekly, or a monthly validity, some of that I'm sure has to be revisited kind of ASAP, because obviously that's something that's growing real quickly here.
Yeah, I think especially we've made a lot of our accounts and any one of our forecasts aware. We're in the same boat as so many other teams are. So yeah. I don't think this is anything that's kind of surprising to a lot of any of our customers, or because that's what's being communicated by the carrier. So I think the TLC team does a great job of being as proactive in getting those out so that we can pivot as needed. But yeah, that's something that's across the board. Everyone's experiencing it right now.
Yeah, I'm sure that the focus really is still on what you guys have been doing with developing new carriers and relationships. Obviously, everyone's dealing with the same fuel surcharges. Where does that come from? Where does a fuel surcharge come from? Is it something published by like a union or organization? Or
so the fuel surcharge is based off of government data over the national average for diesel prices. In trucks, specifically in liquid bulk, basically every carrier has their own table that you get the percentage from after that, but they all go off of the same numbers, and they're usually all within a percentage point or two of each other.
So the government says the fuel surcharge is X, and then each carrier derives their actual what they're going to charge from that, and
right,
a little bit differently.
Yeah, they provide the data.
Got it. Any recommendations for people on what to do? It just really stay close to your freight teams and understand what's happening on the surcharges and what to expect for rates?
Yeah, I think everyone has to be pretty fluid right now.
Yeah.
I think open communication is key. I think as we get the information passed along to us, we're immediately passing along that to all of our customers. And I think the best way is just to be upfront, open and honest with immediate data that we have been provided.
Yeah, obviously a pretty unprecedented thing with how quickly gas prices have increased. So
yeah, definitely.
Just one new logistical challenge to add to the suite of current issues going on.
Yeah, it is. But with the truck pricing, it's something, to your point of how to look at it, you really have to look at it almost on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
Rail cars are a little bit different because that goes off of historical numbers. So you normally have a window of a month or two where you'll see that you'll see the rise from this month come into an effect a couple months down the road. So you can plan that out better. But definitely the tank trucks.
Is that typical? The fuel surcharges are valid for about a week?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not like they could be changing midweek or from Tuesday to Wednesday. It could be different.
No, they won't change in the week.
Interesting. What about the other formats of freight? What's going on with LTL freight? How's LTL shipments been recently? Joe laughs. That's not a good sign.
Yeah, I think ultimately what we're communicating to a lot of our customers is build in an extra day or two transit time. We typically do a nice job of communicating what the estimated transit time is going to be.
Sure.
But we usually, just good rule of thumb right now is build in an extra day or two. So many of these terminals we're hearing are just seriously backlogged with so much freight as it is that getting it onto a truck, even if it gets onto a truck, I mean, there's a few examples we have this week of even if it gets on a truck doesn't mean it's making delivery that day.
Right.
They're just so inundated right now.
Yeah. And you manage rail cars. How's the rail management been the last couple of weeks? I know you mentioned you've been getting more and more requests for intermodal shipments. Obviously, we manage a suite of bulk liquid rail cars. How's the rails been the last few weeks here?
I mean, the rail yards as a whole, continue to be backed up a little bit. Most of the serving yards, but that's, for the most part, it's been fairly steady at that pace. It's a little slow, but that's it's a steady slow is what it is. As far as general rail cars, the rail market seems to be busy. Seem to be a lot of carload shipments. I know we spoke with a repair shop the other day that said that, they are at one of their lowest points for cars in the shop that they've been at. So that would point to me that a lot of cars are in service, a lot of freight is moving, and that's a good thing, especially when shops, right now you can get a turn time of cars going in to get repaired of about a week. And we've seen points in the past where it's been 3 months or so.
Wow.
From the time it gets to the shop. So it's definitely good for that.
So rail shipments are still something you're comfortable recommending, obviously assuming the volumes are there and it's the correct lanes and distances and whatnot, but that's still been a positive maybe transition for some companies that historically hadn't been looking at rail shipments.
Yeah, definitely.
They should at least.
Worth considering if it's something you haven't thought about. I'm sure if you've only done liquid tank trucks or container shipments, maybe switching to intermodal might be kind of a scary thing to get into, but obviously companies like you guys are fantastic resources to understand what makes sense where and price it out all the ways and see what the best option is. And
I think a lot of end users need to consider, again, making their freight that much more attractive. And maybe that means if they're looking to grow, what does it cost to have rail siding? What does it cost to, have some of those options available to you to make as many options kind of open up as possible. Yeah,
as many options as you can. I think we talked last time about making your freight as attractive as possible, so give yourself options in those windows to be successful.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, to Joe's point, making the change to rail, adding rail cars, if you're adding storage tanks, things like that can definitely be intimidating if it's not something that you're used to.
Sure.
Again, that's where I would rely on folks like us, because we have experience with storage tanks, we have experience with rail cars and things like that.
So you're saying you won't have great luck if company A just calls one of the rail yards and tries to book a rail car? It's not gonna work out in their favor.
Probably not.
Yeah.
No.
Good luck.
Makes sense. Imports, exports, status around the ports. I know obviously you guys manage a significant number of loads coming into the U.S. as well as leaving the U.S. What's the ports been like these days?
I think we're seeing the trickle down effect across all the ports. What used to be a somewhat reasonable release time from Savannah or Charleston as a different avenue besides LA or New York, we're starting to see those stack up.
Yep.
As well as even just being able to return some of the containers back to the yards. That's just a staggering issue that so many of these ports are just not designed to be able to handle right now. So we're seeing some pretty glaring holes in the infrastructure right now.
Have you seen any positive notes on availability of trucks? I mean, are we starting to see any additional drivers coming to the marketplace? Any marketing campaigns that are working to get additional drivers in play? I know we've seen some crazy numbers, like 6-figure, first-year salaries for some of these drivers coming on to try to entice kids coming out of college to pursue the CDL route. Have you seen any improvements on availability, or has it been kind of about the same in general?
I mean, I'd say that it's a little bit better than it was, but for the most part, I would say we're kind of at like a plateau.
Yeah. No better, no worse.
There's definitely a lot of price increases and things going into effect to try and, be able to pay those drivers more.
Sure.
And to try and lure more drivers into the, employment market on that end.
Yeah.
And I think in some cases that definitely has worked.
It's going to be a slow process.
Yeah,
though.
it's definitely going to be a slow process.
And I think liquid bulk especially is a little bit more challenging, just given all the extra nuances that are needed for a driver in that industry for sure. I mean, drive-in.
And I think we talked in the past, like the liquid bulk overall is a relatively small percentage of the general freight industry, but obviously for chemicals and especially for TCC's business, it's a pretty big part of it. So we kind of see that little microcosm of it where we think it's a massive deal, but obviously when you talk the whole scope of the logistics industry, it's a relatively small piece.
Yeah, it is. And, to the point that Joe brought up, the liquid bulk drivers, you're always going to have less, mainly because, there's less business out there for that, to your point of it's a smaller market. But also because when you think about liquid bulk, there are so many extra things that you have to do after you get your CDL.
Yeah.
You have to get, most cases you have to get your hazmat certification. You have to, get tanker certifications, all kinds of things like that.
Yeah, makes sense.
And that just adds costs for prospective new drivers. It adds, more difficult things to do.
Well, appreciate the update. Any final words of wisdom on the logistics front these days? What are you telling either operations people or some of your sales contacts?
Yeah, I mean, I would say just operationally, just stay in communication with people right now, especially with fuel, being all over the place and unpredictable. Just constant communication. Be prepared for things to change at a moment's notice. Yeah,
make it a point maybe to follow up weekly on. Obviously, I'm sure historically fuel surcharges haven't changed too drastically, so it wasn't a big conversation. But now that it's doubled in the last couple of weeks, more of a focus point.
Definitely.
And you're out traveling.
Yes.
Been at some shows. You've got some shows coming up. Where
from a sales perspective, Fort Worth last week was awesome.
Yeah.
I think that was probably one of the better attended shows and a lot of buzz going on down there. So it was great to see everybody out there. Traveling down to the Mid-American Truck Show in a couple of weeks down in Louisville, AFPM shortly thereafter, end of March, and then we'll be at the American Coating Show in Indy at the beginning of April. So busy couple of weeks.
Yeah, for sure.
Couple of weeks.
Well, Jamie, Joe, appreciate you guys coming on again.
Thanks.
Hopefully see you here in the next month or two, and
hopefully with better news.
Hopefully fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. I like the optimism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ben.